My name is Torith, and I have worked security at Outpost Viridian for 12 cycles. 12 cycles of scanning cargo manifests, breaking up drunken disputes between traders, and watching the endless flow of species pass through our transit hub. Phyrexians like myself, we pride ourselves on logic, on order, on the predictable nature of cause and effect. We calculate risk matrices in our heads, while your species still fumbles with basic arithmetic. That particular morning cycle started like any other, which is to say boring as hell. The main concourse buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Merchants hawked their wares, station announcements echoed in 17 languages, and somewhere a Yulian child was throwing what I can only describe as a spectacular tantrum over denied candy. My daughter Prila clung to my lower manipulator arm, her compound eyes wide with wonder at all the strange beings moving past us. She had begged me for weeks to see the station during my shift. What harm could it do, I thought. Famous last words, as the humans say. I noticed him then. The human, Dane Cortez, though I would not learn his name until later. He stood near a textile merchant's stall examining some kind of earth fabric with the casual interest of someone killing time before a flight. Humans were not uncommon at Viridian, situated as we were along the major trade routes, but they still drew attention. That peculiar two-legged gait, those unsettling forward-facing predator eyes, the way they smiled with their teeth showing, unnerving. The lot of them. Cortez looked unremarkable by human standards, I suppose. Average height for his species, dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing the practical jumpsuit favored by independent cargo runners. Nothing about him screamed danger or heroism or stupidity. He just looked tired, like he had been traveling too long and sleeping too little. The first explosion changed everything. The sound hit like a physical force, a concussive blast that sent bodies sprawling and cargo containers tumbling. My training kicked in immediately, my secondary arms reaching for my weapon while my primary arms grabbed Prilla and pulled her close. Screams erupted in a dozen different pitches and languages. The acrid smell of burning circuitry filled the air. Then came the second blast, closer this time, near the environmental controls. Emergency klaxons began their awful wailing. Red alert lighting bathed everything in crimson. And then they appeared. 6 of them, maybe 7, hard to tell in the chaos. Extremists from the Zoltar Liberation Front, I would learn later, armed with energy blades and some kind of improvised explosive devices. They wore mismatched armor and faceplates, but their intent was crystal clear. They wanted blood, they wanted attention, and they wanted fear. They were doing a fantastic job on all 3 counts. People scattered in every direction, a stampede of panicked beings with no coordination and even less sense. I tried to move toward the security checkpoint where my team would be mounting a response, but the crowd pushed against me like a living tide. Prilla screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony. That is when I saw them. 3 children, Phyrexian younglings, like my daughter, frozen in terror near the central fountain. They had been on a school trip. I realized with horror. Their teacher lay motionless nearby, green blood pooling beneath her carapace. 2 of the terrorists were moving toward them, energy blades humming with lethal charge, and standing there between the children and certain death, having apparently lost his mind entirely, was the human merchant Dane Cortez. He had no weapon, no armor, no backup. He just stood there, arms spread wide, looking at armed killers like they were a minor inconvenience instead of his imminent death. I remember thinking, in that frozen moment of clarity, what in the name of the ancients is this idiot doing? The first terrorist reached Cortez in 3 long strides, energy blade raised high, and I swear on my ancestors the human did not even flinch. Now, let me explain something about energy blades for those unfamiliar with such weapons. They are not clean, they are not quick, they superheat matter on a molecular level, cauterizing as they cut, which means the victim stays conscious far longer than anyone deserves. Military interrogators across 6 systems have banned their use for precisely this reason. They are designed to make suffering last. The blade came down in a vicious arc, aimed at Cortez's shoulder. He twisted, not away, but into the strike, and the weapon punched through his upper chest instead of his heart. I heard the sizzle of burning flesh even over the chaos. Steam rose from the wound. The second terrorist, apparently offended that the human refused to simply die like a reasonable being, came in from the left. His blade caught Cortez in the side just below the ribs and twisted. That should have been the end. That should have dropped any sentient creature in the known galaxy. Cortez sagged, blood spreading across his jumpsuit in dark wet patches, but he did not fall. Instead, And I watched this happen with my own 4 eyes, so I know it is true. He pulled the first terrorist closer and headbutted him hard enough that the faceplates cracked. What kind of species weaponizes their own skull? The third attacker saw an opportunity and drove his blade into Cortez's back between the shoulder blades. The human arched, and a sound came from his throat that I can still hear in my dreams. Not a scream exactly. More like fury given voice, like his body had simply decided that dying could wait until he was done being angry about it. He was still standing, still blocking the children from harm. I was fighting through the crowd, trying to reach them, but it felt like moving through setting concrete. Beings pressed against me from all sides, everyone trying to flee the carnage. My weapon was useless with so many civilians in the line of fire. Prilla clung to my thorax, sobbing, and all I could do was watch this human stranger choose, again and again, to take blades meant for children he had never met. The fourth strike caught him in the thigh. The fifth opened a gash across his forearm when he raised it to protect his face. The sixth, the seventh, they all landed because Cortez was not fast enough, not trained enough, not genetically engineered for combat like so many warrior species. He was just a cargo runner who had decided that 3 Threxian children mattered more than his own survival. The terrorists were screaming at him now, demanding he move, get out of the way, stop being so aggravatingly difficult to murder. One of them, the leader I think, shouted something about human arrogance, about teaching the Confederation a lesson. Cortez, blood pouring from at least 7 wounds that I could count, looked at this terrorist and said, and I quote exactly because the words burned into my memory, "Yeah? Well, you are doing a really terrible job of it, buddy." Then he punched the terrorist in the throat. The 8th blade, the final one, came from behind. A coward's strike, aimed at the base of the skull, intended to sever the spinal column. But Cortez was already falling by then, his legs finally giving out, and the blade skated off his shoulder instead, opening another red canyon across his back. He collapsed to his knees, then forward onto his hands, forming a bridge with his body. The 3 children huddled beneath him, untouched, screaming but alive. Blood dripped from Cortez onto the polished station floor, each drop echoing like accusation. That was when my team finally broke through. Plasma fire lit up the concourse. The terrorists, realizing they had lost the initiative, scattered. 2 went down immediately. The others triggered smoke grenades and disappeared into the maintenance corridors. I reached Cortez as he toppled sideways, his body finally accepting what his mind had refused to acknowledge. He was dying. No question about it. Humans are supposedly durable, but nothing survives that much trauma, that much blood loss, that much cellular damage from superheated blades. His eyes found mine, unfocused but aware, and he smiled. Actually smiled. The absolute madman, showing those unsettling human teeth now stained red. "Kids okay?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The 3 children were crawling out from beneath him, crying, terrified but whole. Prilla had broken free from my grip and was trying to reach them, her small voice calling out to the younglings. "They are safe," I told him, kneeling beside this dying stranger. "Because of you." "Good," Cortez said, and his eyes closed. That is good." Medical teams swarmed around us. Someone was shouting for emergency surgical equipment. Someone else was yelling about human blood types and whether we even had compatible plasma on station. I heard the words critical condition, massive trauma, less than 10% chance, and my hands were shaking as I stood back to let them work. Prilla pressed against my side, staring at the human being loaded onto a medical transport, and asked the question I could not answer. "Why did he do that, Papa? Why did that human save us?" I had no idea. None whatsoever. But I was going to find out. The medical bay on level 7 became my second home over the next 3 days. I filed my incident reports, gave my statements to 6 different investigators, and accepted temporary trauma leave. Also, I could sit in an uncomfortable chair outside surgical bay 3 and wait. Prilla stayed with her mother. Thank the ancients, but she asked about the human every time I called. Is he alive? Will he be okay? Can I see him? Questions I could not answer because the medical staff looked more confused and frustrated every time I asked them the same things. Nurse Brel, an Aquilane with silver-white feathers and the patience of a saint, finally took pity on me on the 2nd day. "Officer Torith," she said, her translator rendering her chirping speech into flat, clinical tones. "I need you to understand something about human physiology. We are making this up as we go." That was not encouraging. She led me to an observation window where I could see into the surgical bay. Cortez lay on a table designed for beings 3 times his size, surrounded by medical equipment from 8 different species, because apparently no one bothered to stock human-specific supplies at a station this far from Earth. "Look at this," Brel said, pulling up a holographic display of Cortez's internal structure. The wounds glowed red against the blue wireframe of his body. There were so many. By any logical assessment, he should have died at the scene. The blade that pierced his chest punctured his lung. The one in his side lacerated his liver. The spinal strike, while not fatal, should have left him paralyzed. "But he is alive," I said, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. "He is alive," she agreed, and she sounded almost offended by this fact. "Do you know what his body did, Officer Torres? It clotted. Aggressively. Messily. His blood vessels constricted. His platelets went into overdrive, and he basically plugged the holes through sheer biological stubbornness. We have never seen anything like it outside of military-grade regenerative species." A Doranian doctor whose name I never caught walked past, shaking his scaled head. "Humans," he muttered. "Built like cargo haulers and too stupid to know when they are dead." I would have taken offense on Cortez's behalf, but the doctor was not entirely wrong. More beings started arriving on the 3rd day. At first I thought they were family, but no, these were soldiers, warriors. I recognized the insignia of at least 4 different military branches, and several carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of special operations. Commander Vask arrived first, a Corthian whose species practically invented the concept of honor combat. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous armor polished to a mirror sheen, forearms crossed in what I had learned was a gesture of respect. "I wish to pay my respects to the human," he said when I asked what he was doing there. "He is not dead yet," I replied, perhaps more sharply than intended. "I know," Vask said. "That is why I came." Captain Raxith showed up next, a Doranian Special Forces officer with scars that told stories of 100 battles. She carried a small box made of corroded metal, which she set carefully on a nearby table. "Is that," I started. "A piece of my first ship," she confirmed. "Saved my entire platoon when I crashed it into an enemy position 20 cycles ago. Seemed appropriate." Then came others. A human general named Thorn, who apparently diverted his transport 3 systems out of the way just to be here. A Yulian monk, who brought prayer crystals. A Netheri pilot who had served with humans during the Outer Rim conflicts and swore they were the craziest bastards he had ever flown with. And he meant that as the highest compliment. The medical bay waiting area became crowded with decorated warriors from a dozen species, all waiting for news on a cargo runner who probably could not tell a plasma rifle from a food dispenser. Nurse Brel looked overwhelmed. "Officer Torres, what is happening? Why are all these people here?" I had been wondering the same thing, so I asked. Commander Vask answered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of warrior tradition. "Because what he did was not survival instinct. It was not training. It was choice. Pure choice. He saw children in danger and decided his life was an acceptable price for theirs. Do you understand how rare that is? Anyone would have..." I started. "No," Captain Raxith interrupted. "They would not. I have seen trained soldiers hesitate when faced with such odds. I have seen warriors calculate their chances and decide retreat was the logical option. I have done it myself, but this human, this Dane Cortez, he did not even seem to consider any option except standing his ground." The Yulian monk spoke then, his voice soft but clear. "In my culture, we believe that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Your human friend. He was afraid. We saw the footage, but he acted anyway." "They had footage?" Of course they had footage. Station security recorded everything, which meant everyone in 6 systems had probably seen Cortez take 8 blades for children he did not know. General Thorne, the human military officer, looked at me with eyes that had seen too much combat. "Officer Torres, humans are not special. We are not stronger, not faster, not smarter than most species, but we have this thing, this defect really, where we sometimes just refuse to accept the logical outcome. We call it stubbornness. Others call it stupidity, but every now and then it looks a lot like heroism." On the morning of the 3rd day, the medical monitors began showing increased neural activity. Nurse Brel rushed into the surgical bay, followed by half a dozen medical staff. I stood at the window watching, my spiracles working overtime to pull in enough oxygen. And then Dane Cortez opened his eyes. The medical staff looked shocked. The warriors in the waiting area stood at attention as if an officer had just entered the room. I found myself laughing, a chittering sound that made several people turn to look at me. The stubborn human was awake. Against all odds, against all logic, against the universe's clear preference for tidier outcomes, Dane Cortez was awake. Now came the interesting part. Explaining to him why his room was about to be filled with some of the most dangerous warriors in the Confederation, all waiting to honor a cargo runner who just wanted to ship textiles and mind his own business. This was going to be entertaining. They let me in first, which I appreciated. Cortez needed at least one familiar face before the parade of decorated killers started filing through to shake his hand or whatever gesture of respect their species preferred. He looked terrible, which was actually a significant improvement from 3 days ago when he looked dead. Bandages covered most of his visible skin, medical tubes snaked in and out of various access points, and the monitoring equipment beeped in rhythms I had learned meant stable but fragile. His eyes tracked me as I entered and I saw recognition flicker there. "Security guy," he said, his voice rough like grinding metal. "With the kid." "Officer Torres," I confirmed, pulling a chair closer to his bed. "And yes, the one with the daughter you saved along with 3 other children. They really okay?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice, which was absurd considering his current state. "They are fine. Traumatized, undergoing therapy but physically unharmed. You, on the other hand, are held together by what Nurse Brill describes as medical innovation. Sheer luck, and apparently your body's refusal to acknowledge basic biological limits." A small smile tugged at his mouth, then turned into a wince. "Hurts to smile. That is new. You took 8 energy blade strikes. Everything is going to hurt for a while." 8? He looked genuinely surprised. I stopped counting after 4. Before I could respond, the door opened and Nurse Brill entered. Her feathers fluffed in what I had learned indicated stress. "Mr. Cortez, you have visitors. Many visitors. I tried to limit them, but several of them outrank me by, well, several pay grades." Cortez frowned. "Visitors? I am a freelance cargo runner. The only people who should be visiting are debt collectors, and they usually just send threatening messages." "These are not debt collectors," I said, and gestured toward the door. What followed was perhaps the most surreal hour of my life, and I once had to explain to a Xylothian ambassador why his ceremonial mating dance was not appropriate behavior in our station cantina. Commander Vask entered first, having to duck through the doorway, his massive frame making the medical bay feel suddenly cramped. He approached Cortez's bed, forearms moving in the complex gesture that Corthian warriors reserved for equals who had proven themselves in combat. Cortez stared. Hello?" "Dane Cortez," Vask said, his voice like rolling thunder. "I am Commander Vask of the Corthian 3rd Fleet. I came to honor your courage." "My what now?" Captain Raxith stepped forward next, placing her corroded metal box on the bedside table. "A token," she said simply, "from one warrior to another." "I am not a warrior," Cortez protested, looking at me as if I could explain this madness. "I haul cargo, mostly textiles, sometimes spices if the profit margin is good." General Thorne, the human officer, chuckled as he entered. "Cortez, do you have any idea what you have done?" "Apparently survived," Cortez offered weakly. "You made every trained soldier in 6 systems feel inadequate," Thorne said, but he was smiling. "You took 8 blades for alien children without hesitation, without training, without any logical reason to think you would survive. Do you know how many combat veterans watched that footage and thought, would I have done that?" Cortez looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "Anyone would have." "No," Vask interrupted. "They would not. We have spent our lives training for combat, preparing for sacrifice, learning to overcome survival instinct. You did it without thinking. That is not training. That is character." More warriors filed in, each offering their respects in different ways. The Yulian monk performed a brief blessing. A Nethari pilot gave him a flight badge from his 1st squadron. A Threxian military commander, someone I recognized from recruitment posters, simply nodded once and said, "Well done." Cortez looked overwhelmed, his eyes moving from face to face, clearly trying to process why his hospital room had turned into some kind of interspecies military convention. "I do not understand," he finally said. There were kids. What was I supposed to do, let them die?" "Yes," Captain Raxith said bluntly. "That would have been the logical choice, the safe choice, the choice that keeps you alive to see tomorrow. But you chose differently." "It was not even a choice," Cortez protested. "I just moved, saw the kids, saw the blades, and my body just went. Didn't think about it." Commander Vask leaned forward slightly. That, Dane Cortez, is what we came to understand. You acted on instinct, but not survival instinct. Protective instinct. For younglings that were not even your species. This is unusual. General Thorne pulled up a chair. Cortez, you need to understand something. The footage of what you did has spread across the Confederation networks. Every military academy is going to use it in courage training. Every parent is telling their children about the human who stood against impossible odds. You have become, and I am sorry about this, a symbol. A symbol? Cortez looked horrified. Of what? Of the better parts of sentient nature, the Yulian monk said quietly. Of the moment when choice matters more than calculation. I am not a hero, Cortez insisted, his voice getting stronger despite the obvious pain. Heroes are people like you all, trained, professional. I am just a guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Wrong place. I spoke up then, unable to stay quiet. Mr. Cortez, you were in exactly the right place, because if you were not there, I would be planning funerals for 4 children right now, including my daughter. So please, do not dismiss what you did. That seemed to hit him differently. His eyes found mine and something in his expression shifted. Your daughter. The little one who was holding your, leg thing. Manipulator arm. I corrected. And yes, Prilla. She asks about you every day. Wants to thank the nice human who saved her friends. Cortez's eyes went suspiciously bright, and he blinked rapidly. She does not need to thank me. Well, she is going to anyway, I said. Because that is what decent beings do when someone saves their life. Nurse Brell chose that moment to intervene, shooing the warriors toward the door despite their ranks and decorations. Mr. Cortez needs rest. You can all come back and make him uncomfortable with your praise later. As they filed out, each warrior nodded or saluted or performed whatever gesture of respect their culture demanded. Cortez watched them go, looking exhausted and bewildered in equal measure. When only General Thorne, Nurse Brell, and I remained, Cortez spoke again. This is insane. You know that, right? All of this is completely insane. Welcome to being a human in the Confederation, Thorne said with a grin. We specialize in making other species question their assumptions. You just did it more dramatically than most. After Thorne left, promising to return with official commendations that Cortez clearly did not want, I remained in my chair. Officer Toreth, Cortez said quietly. Can I ask you something? Of course. If the situation was reversed, if it was human children in danger and a Threxian standing there, would you think it was just as heroic? I considered this carefully. Yes, because the species does not matter. The choice does. You chose to value their lives over your own, that will always be worth honoring. He nodded slowly, then winced again. Definitely hurts to nod too. Good to know. Despite everything, I found myself chittering with laughter again. This human, this absolutely ridiculous, stubborn, self-sacrificing human had changed something fundamental in how the Confederation viewed his species, and he just wanted to know if smiling would keep hurting. The story spread like radiation through a cracked containment field, fast and impossible to stop. By day 4, every major news network in the Confederation had run the footage. By day 5, it had been analyzed, dissected, and debated by military strategists, psychologists, and philosophers across 24 systems. By day 6, someone had set it to music, which Cortez found particularly disturbing when I showed him the vid on my datapad. They made a song, he asked, looking vaguely nauseated. About me getting stabbed. That is deeply weird. The chorus translates roughly to, stand firm, bleed brave, protect the small, I explained. It has been downloaded 40 million times. I hate everything about that. But the song was the least of it, really. The cultural shockwave that followed was far more interesting, and I had a front row seat to watch it unfold. See, here is the thing about the Confederation. We have hundreds of member species, thousands of cultures, and an endless variety of perspectives on courage, duty, and sacrifice. But we had all sort of collectively agreed on certain assumptions about humans. They were tough, sure, durable, could eat things that would kill most species and shake off injuries that would hospitalize others. But we thought we understood them. Aggressive primates with decent tool-making skills and a tendency toward violence, useful in combat, unpredictable in diplomacy, profitable in trade. Then Dane Cortez went and took 8 blades for children he had never met, and suddenly everyone had to reconsider. Commander Vask returned on day 7 with 3 other Corthian officers, all wanting to meet the human who had, in their words, demonstrated the purest form of warrior spirit without any warrior training. I watched them try to reconcile this with their understanding of combat philosophy. You had no tactical advantage, one of them said, more confused than critical. No weapon, no armor, no support, no exit strategy. By every military doctrine, your action was suicide. Cortez shrugged, which made him wince because everything still made him wince. Yeah, probably. But the kids did not have any of those things either, so it seemed like we were even. The Corthians looked at each other, having some kind of silent conversation through mandible movements I could not interpret. This is the human paradox, Vask finally said. You acknowledge the illogic of your actions even as you defend them. You knew it was suicide, but you acted anyway. Why? Because the alternative was watching kids die, Cortez said, as if this explained everything. To him, apparently, it did. Captain Raxith brought her entire special operations team on day 8. 12 Duranian soldiers, each with enough combat experience to write tactical manuals, all standing in Cortez's medical bay looking at him like he was a puzzle they could not solve. We run scenarios, Raxith explained. Constant training for impossible situations. How to maximize survival probability while completing objectives. We showed your footage to our instructors. Do you know what they said? That I am an idiot? Cortez offered. That you ignored every survival instinct and still succeeded, Raxith corrected. By all probability models you should have died, the children should have died, and the terrorist should have escaped. But you created a scenario that was not in our training matrix. You made yourself the objective, not rescue, not neutralization. Just be the obstacle, absorb the damage, exist as a barrier until help arrives. It was not that complicated, Cortez protested. I just stood there. While being stabbed 8 times, one of the Duranian soldiers added helpfully. Well, yes, that part was not ideal. The military analysts loved him. The media could not get enough of him. But the response that surprised me most came from the civilian population. Parents from 16 different species sent messages. Not to me, not to the station, but directly to Cortez's medical terminal. Thousands of them. Thanking him, telling him about their own children, sharing stories about times they wished someone had been there to protect their younglings. Cortez read them when he thought no one was watching. I caught him wiping his eyes more than once. They do not even know me, he said when I asked about it. These people, they're kids. They are on planets I have never visited, living lives I will never see. Why do they care? Because you proved something they needed to believe. I said, that when the moment comes, when everything is on the line, someone might choose to protect the innocent even at cost to themselves. You made the universe feel a little less cruel. He was quiet for a long moment. That is a lot of weight for 8 stab wounds. You are the one who chose to carry it. General Thorne returned on day 9 with news that made Cortez go pale, which was impressive considering humans could apparently function with significant blood loss. The Confederation Council wants to award you the Star of Valor, Thorne said. It has only been given 43 times in the last 2 centuries, usually posthumously. I am not a soldier, Cortez said for what must have been the 100th time. No, you are not. Thorne agreed. That is exactly why they want to give it to you. Because you represent something that military training cannot create. Pure, instinctive protection of the vulnerable. Can I refuse it? You can try. They will probably give it to you anyway. The academic community wanted to study him, which Cortez found even more disturbing than the song. Psychologists wanted to understand his decision-making process. Biologists wanted to know how human physiology supported such damage tolerance. Sociologists wanted to analyze the cultural implications of cross-species protective instinct. I am not a research subject, he told me. I am just a cargo runner who wants to go back to shipping textiles and being completely anonymous. That option left the station about 9 days ago, I said. Right around the time you decided to become a human shield. But here's what fascinated me most. The thing I noticed watching all these different species react to what Cortez had done. It was not just respect. It was recognition. Every species has stories about this kind of sacrifice. The Corthians have the tale of the first defender. The Aquilans sing songs about the nest protector. Even my own Threxian culture has legends of the hive guardian who stood against impossible odds to save the young. We all understood the concept, we all honored it. But we all thought it was mythology. Ancient stories told to teach values, not actual behavior patterns that still existed in modern logical spacefaring civilizations. Then along came this human cargo runner to remind us that sometimes the old stories are not just stories. On day 10, the 3 children Cortez had saved were finally cleared for a visit. They came with their parents, all of them carrying handmade gifts and wearing their best ceremonial garments. Prila led them, because of course she did. My daughter had never been shy. She climbed onto a chair next to Cortez's bed, looked at him with her compound eyes reflecting the medical bay lights and said, "Thank you for not letting the bad people hurt us." Cortez, this human who had faced down armed terrorists without flinching, looked absolutely terrified of one small Threxian child. "You are welcome," he managed. "Does it hurt?" Prilla asked, pointing at his bandages. "A bit," he admitted. "Papa says you were very brave." "Your papa is exaggerating." "Papa does not exaggerate," Prilla said seriously. "He is Threxian. We are very logical." Despite everything, Cortez laughed, which made him wince, which made him laugh harder. "You are absolutely right. My apology." The other children approached them, shyly, offering their gifts. Drawings, mostly, rendered in the bright colors Threxian younglings favored. They all showed the same scene from different angles, a human standing between children and danger. None of them had drawn the blades. They had drawn him whole, protective, safe. "We are going to remember you forever," one of them said. And watching Cortez's face, watching him try not to cry in front of these kids he had saved, I realized something. He had not done it for glory or recognition or awards. He had done it because, in that moment, those children needed someone to stand between them and death, and he happened to be there. The fact that it cost him 8 stab wounds, 3 liters of blood, and his comfortable anonymity was, from his perspective, entirely beside the point. Humans, I decided, were absolutely insane, and the galaxy was better for it. They released Cortez from medical care on day 14, against his doctor's recommendations and his own better judgment. Nurse Brell had some strong opinions about humans who refused to follow proper recovery protocols, which she expressed loudly and at length in 3 different languages. "You should remain under observation for at least another week," she insisted, her feathers fluffing with agitation. "Your liver is still regenerating. Your lung capacity is only at 70%, and the neural damage from the spinal strike could present complications." "I will take it easy," Cortez promised, already dressed in a new jumpsuit that some well-meaning admirer had sent him. "No heavy lifting, no heroics, just back to my ship and regular boring cargo runs." "You cannot even walk without assistance," she pointed out. This was true. I had been enlisted as his temporary support system, which meant Cortez leaned heavily on my shoulder as we made our way through the station corridors. For a species that supposedly valued independence, he was remarkably willing to accept help when his body decided cooperation was optional. "Where are we going?" he asked, as I steered him away from the docking bay. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption," I said. "You owe me that much." We ended up in Observation Deck C, a little used area with a viewport showing the endless expanse of space beyond the station. A few ships moved in the distance, their running lights blinking like patient stars. I helped Cortez into a seat, and he settled with a grunt that spoke volumes about his pain levels. "You should have stayed in medical," I said. "I have been poked, prodded, scanned, and analyzed for 2 weeks," he replied. "If one more well-meaning specialist tried to take tissue samples, I was going to start biting people. And before you ask, yes, human bites can be dangerous. We have surprisingly bacteria-rich mouths." I chittered with laughter despite myself. "You are deflecting." "I am excellent at deflecting. It is one of my core skills." "Cortez," I said, settling into the seat across from him. "I need to understand something, and I need you to answer honestly, not with humor, or self-deprecation, or whatever defense mechanism you are using to avoid thinking about what happened." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "Okay, why did you do it?" "Not the simple answer. Not because kids were in danger. I need to understand the human thought process that led you to decide that your life was worth trading for children you had never met, of a species you barely know, in a situation where survival was statistically impossible." Cortez was quiet for so long I thought maybe he would not answer. Then he sighed, and it sounded like something heavy being set down after a long carry. "You want the truth?" "I do not have a good reason. There was no logical process. I saw those kids. I saw the blades. And something in my brain just switched. It was not even a conscious decision. It was like my body made the choice before my mind caught up." "That makes no sense from a survival standpoint." "No, it does not," he agreed. "But humans, we are not optimized for individual survival. We are social pack animals who evolved by taking care of each other, protecting the young, the vulnerable, The ones who could not protect themselves. It is baked into our DNA at a level that bypasses rational thought. He shifted in his seat, wincing. There is this thing called the empathy response. We feel what others feel. When I saw those kids terrified, I felt their fear. When I saw them in danger, my body treated it like my own danger. Except the solution was not run away. The solution was, stand between them and the threat, make myself the target instead. Even knowing you would probably die. Especially knowing that, he said quietly, because if I ran, if I calculated my odds and decided my life was worth more than theirs, I would have to live with that choice. Every day, every time I closed my eyes, I would see their faces. I would know I could have helped, and chose not to. That is its own kind of death, Torith. Slower, worse. I processed this, my Threxian logic trying to reconcile such illogical reasoning. So you are saying the psychological cost of inaction was higher than the physical cost of action? More or less, he said. Though I was not doing cost-benefit analysis at the time, I was mostly thinking, oh crap, those are energy blades, this is going to hurt. It did hurt. It really, really did, he confirmed. Would not recommend. 0 stars. Terrible experience all around. We sat in silence for a moment watching a transport ship slide past the viewport on its way to somewhere important. My people value logic above all else, I said finally. We calculate risks, we assess probabilities, we make decisions based on optimal outcomes. What you did was by our standards completely irrational. But, Cortez prompted, hearing the unspoken word, but rationality would have let those children die. Logic would have prioritized my own survival over theirs, and I would have lived with that failure for the rest of my life. So perhaps in this one specific circumstance, being irrational was the right choice. Careful, Torith, Cortez said with a slight smile. That kind of thinking could get you kicked out of the Logical Species Club. I will risk it. The door opened behind us and I turned to see Prilla entering with her mother Vess. My daughter had been asking to see Cortez again, and I had finally agreed, provided she promised not to climb on him or ask to touch his bandages. She had promised. I did not entirely believe her, but some risks were acceptable. Mr. Cortez, Prilla said, rushing forward before Vess could stop her. She stopped just short of his chair, remembering her manners. Are you leaving? Just going back to my ship, Cortez said. I have cargo contracts to fulfill. Textiles wait for no one. Will you come back? She asked. And there was worry in her voice. Cortez glanced at me, then back at Prilla. I have a regular route that includes this station, so yes, I will be back. Probably in a few weeks once I finish my current contracts. Good, Prilla said firmly. Because I made you something and Mama said I had to wait until you were better to give it to you, and if you left forever I would be very upset. She held out a small object, carefully wrapped in traditional Threxian gift cloth. Cortez took it gently, unwrapped it, and revealed a carved stone no bigger than his thumb. It had been etched with symbols I recognized, the characters for protector and friend. I helped carve it, Prilla explained. Papa showed me how. It is made from stone from our home colony, so you will remember us. Cortez held the stone like it was precious metal, his eyes suspiciously bright again. Thank you, Prilla. I will keep it with me. Always. Good, she said, satisfied. Then she hugged his leg, careful to avoid anywhere that might hurt, and stepped back. Okay, you can go now, but remember to come back. I promise. Vess collected Prilla and departed with a grateful nod in my direction, leaving Cortez and me alone again. That was Cortez started, then stopped, clearing his throat. That was really nice. She wanted you to know you mattered, I said. That what you did was not forgotten. I am definitely going to cry when you are not looking, Cortez informed me. I am looking right now. Well, this is awkward then. I helped him back to his feet, supporting his weight as we made our way slowly toward the docking bay where his ship waited. Other beings recognized him as we walked, stopping to stare or offer quick gestures of respect. Cortez looked uncomfortable with all of it, which somehow made it more genuine. At his ship's airlock, a modified cargo hauler called the Steady Hand. I helped him up the ramp. Torith, he said, turning to face me. Thank you. For visiting. For everything. You saved my daughter's life, I replied. Gratitude does not even begin to cover what I owe you. You do not owe me anything. That is not how this works. Then consider us friends who are even, I suggested. He smiled, genuine and warm despite the pain I knew he was still in. Friends. I can work with that. Good. Because friends tell each other when they are being idiots. And going back to work this soon is idiotic. Noted, he said. But bills do not pay themselves, and I have been out of commission for 2 weeks. Cargo runners run on tight margins. The Confederation Council is giving you the Star of Valor and a significant monetary award. I think your margins will survive. They are actually going through with that. You became the face of courage across 16 systems. They could not give it to you. The political optics alone. Please stop, Cortez said, holding up a hand. I do not want to think about political optics. I want to ship textiles and maybe, if I am feeling adventurous, some spices. Low risk, high profit, zero heroics. Good luck with that, I said. You are famous now. Famous people do not get to be anonymous cargo runners. Then I will be a terrible famous person who avoids attention and makes everyone uncomfortable by refusing to talk about feelings. You are already excellent at that part. He laughed, winced, and laughed again. Get out of here, Torith. Go home to your family. Hug your daughter. Live your logical, well-calculated life, while you live your illogical, poorly calculated one. Exactly. Someone has to balance things out. I left him there, watching from the docking bay as his ship powered up and detached from the station. The steady hand was not impressive by any standard, just another cargo hauler among thousands, piloted by a human who wanted nothing more than to be ordinary. But Dane Cortez had taught me something important, something that my logical Threxian mind had trouble accepting but could no longer deny. Sometimes the most extraordinary acts come from the most ordinary people. Sometimes courage is not about training or preparation or logical assessment of risk. Sometimes it is just about seeing someone who needs help and deciding that your life is not more valuable than theirs. The humans had a word for this kind of person, Thorne had told me. They called them heroes, even when the heroes themselves refused the title. I watched Cortez's ship disappear into the traffic lanes, just another light among millions, carrying a cargo runner who had reminded the entire Confederation what it meant to be truly, impossibly, illogically brave. My daughter was alive because of him. 3 other children were alive because of him. And somewhere in the galaxy, other beings were sleeping a little easier, knowing that when the moment came, someone might choose to stand between them and danger, even at impossible cost to themselves. The humans were insane. And thank the ancients for that, because sometimes in a cold and logical universe what we needed most was not another calculated risk assessment. What we needed was someone stupid enough, brave enough, human enough to simply say, not today, not these kids, not on my watch. Even if it meant taking 8 blades to make that stand. Especially because it meant that. I turned away from the viewport and headed home, where Prila was waiting to tell me all about what she would say to Mr. Cortez when he came back. And he would come back. I was certain of it. Because that was what humans did. They made impossible promises and then somehow found a way to keep them. Absolutely insane. Absolutely remarkable. Absolutely human.